Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. Depending on when you're listening to this, this is the Enough Already podcast. My name is Fingers Malloy. She is Tracy L. Connors. Well, lots to talk about this week, Tracy. I know you watched the big... Oh, whose phone is that? I know you watched the big Bernie Cruz healthcare debate last night on CNN.
That is correct.
I did not. I watched I tracked the hashtag on Twitter while it was going on. I was not in front of a TV, and I really didn't want to chew up all my data on my phone watching it. I want to get your impression. What did you see? And I want to compare it, see if it jives with what I was tracking on Twitter.
Well, if I have to boil it all down, it was Bernie Sanders saying, we need a universal health care option like every other civilized society. And Ted Cruz saying, we need free market intervention and options. Government intervention to undo all this stuff so we can open up the free market. So about as diametrically opposed as you could get on the issue. I mean, Cruz doesn't go as far as I would like to in the libertarian direction on this kind of thing, but I thought he did a swell job kind of defending free market and choice and all those things. But it was pretty interesting. I hope that they do more of these, to be honest. It's nice to see this kind of, such opposed viewpoints argued out on stage. And they had initially started it, CNN hosted it. I believe it was at George Washington University. So you can imagine the makeup of the audience.
Right.
And it was hosted by Dana Bash and Jake Tapper. And they come out and they say, okay, we're going to do, 90 seconds for responses to questions and then 30-second rebuttals. That went out the window almost immediately. The only time they actually kept to the time was they gave them each a 2-minute opening statement. Okay. But then it got so good, the back and forth, that they kind of didn't even try. Occasionally they would say, no, we need to move along. And then either Ted or Bernie would just say, but let me just finish. Let me just get this point out. I think it's really important. But there were some seriously stunning moments, at least as far as our perspective would be coming at it and saying, holy crap, he just gave away the game on the Sanders side. Because they allowed the audience to ask questions. And there were some stacking of the deck on either side. So one woman that got up and asked a question, I don't remember her name. It was an odd name. I want to say LaFonda, but that's not right. That's Napoleon Dynamite, not reality, but something along those lines. And she owned 5 salons in Texas. Mm-hmm. And she couldn't expand her workforce because it would put her over 50 employees, which would then force her to provide health care, which she can't afford to do. She was explaining to Sanders, who's completely befuddled when it comes to what it's like to run a business.
Right.
That the margins in that business are so low that she cannot afford to provide that to her employees. Now, at no point in time was it discussed that her employees are fine to go and buy their own stuff.
Right.
I think Bernie brought it up later after he kind of put his foot in his mouth with her and said, well, if Texas had expanded to Medicaid, they could all be on Medicaid and it would be great. So his response to her was to chastise her for not providing her employees with health care in the first place.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure, no problem.
In his little brain, he thinks, how many salons do you own? 5. Oh, 5 salons, huh? You can't pay for your health? I don't believe it. Basically, you're a nasty woman. So he said, this is, the Blaze has this, I believe, some of the text of this. So he said, she asked about what she should do and what could be done to help people like her in her position. And he's like, let me give you an answer you will not be happy with. I think that for a business that employs 50 people or more, given the nature of our dysfunctional healthcare system, see how he gives it away right there?
Right.
Right now, where most people do get health insurance through the places they work, whose fault is that in the first place? I think the government with, wage controls during the Depression. Okay, I continue. Through the places they work. I'm sorry. I think that in America today, everyone should have health care. And if you have more than 50 people, you know what? I'm afraid to tell you, but I think you have to provide health care. So that doesn't help this woman at all.
Right.
That's not her question.
So basically what you're saying is what you really need to do is provide health care and go out of business in 6 months.
Correct. Correct. And then he talked about competition. Well, I'm sure there are other salons and maybe they charge more, but they're giving their employees health care, so they're going to drive you out of business. He just has no clue how this stuff all works. And
do you really think that, or do you think that he really knows the score, but he knows that his supporters don't have a clue as to how to run a business?
I think that he's completely clueless.
Fair
Don't
enough.
you remember? I mean, I don't know how far he's come from that clip in the 80s when he was saying that bread lines are actually good.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's very difficult to tell. I mean, to me, I picture his head looking something like a dusty attic with a single light bulb hanging from a strand and a bunch of moths surrounding it.
Who needs a salon anyway? Look at my hair.
Right.
I just go to
Supercuts. Or if you go to one of those cosmetology schools, they'll cut your hair for free.
I cut my own hair.
Yeah, Flowbee. Remember those? Great investment. But I thought Ted Cruz did a fine job. And they did have some interesting exchanges about, what constitutes a right. Mm-hmm. That was interesting because you never hear that conversation. I think Cruz could have done a little bit better. He kind of hid behind, he wouldn't say positive rights and negative rights. He just said the Bill of Rights, which tells you what government can't do to you. So that's the idea of negative rights, telling the government what it can't do. But positive rights are what Bernie's saying, that you have a right to things. So that's how I always break it down when I have these discussions with people. It's like you can have rights to actions, but not to things. You can't have objects, and you can't enslave other people to provide you with services or goods.
Oh, whatever. Tracy, they're doctors. They're filthy rich, all of them.
Well, I mean,
they're
at one point,
slaves.
I was taking notes, of course, and he said something about they got into dental care. Mm-hmm. And he's like, we're going to need to tell the dentists that they have to provide care to children. What? I mean, I'm kind of summarizing it, but that's the context.
Wow.
That's exactly what he said. I mean, it's just nuts. We're just going to tell a bunch of people what to do. So I would suggest that everybody watch it just for entertainment value. Mm-hmm. And Ted Cruz was likable.
Really?
Yes, it was bizarre. He was wearing a suit that fit.
Oh, wow.
He was engaging, and he has that ability to remember people's names that I find fascinating. So he would do a callback to somebody that had previously asked a question and say, that would screw over this person. And this is a difficult thing because they've got a bunch of people standing up. I've got this coverage and it could go away. They had a woman that has breast cancer and she's worried that now she's going to lose her coverage. And can you tell me that insurance companies are going to be forced to take people with pre-existing conditions? And so Cruz talked about the fact, okay, well, if you have it, we're going to say that they can't cancel the policy on you. Okay, fair enough. But one of the most interesting things I thought, and Bernie weaseled out of it, of course, was after the discussion of is healthcare a right, Ted Cruz said, well, that's interesting that you say that because there were 6 million people that lost their healthcare. Their health insurance, excuse me. We need to stop conflating the two things. That lost their health insurance because of Obamacare. So did you take away those people's rights? Because you wrote that bill, sir. You were involved in that. Of course, nothing. We're going to divert into a discussion about how much the rich should pay, which was also a fun little piece where Cruz gave out the score that was given to the bill that Bernie had, the Medicaid for All.
Right.
And it was $2.5 trillion in the first year and then $36 trillion over 10. And so Cruz launched into, there was a video that Bill Whittle did a couple years ago with this idea where it's just like, okay, if we confiscate money from everybody that makes over $1 million a year, how much will that cover on the yearly government expenses? Mm-hmm. So he did that with Bernie's bill. And he said, okay, if we took the money that everybody that makes $1 million or more, we took all their money, it would pay for 5 months of Bernie's plan.
Then what?
And then he's like, oh, well, if we took over the biggest corporations, just liquidated them, stole all their assets illegally, I think he said it would cover a year. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just nuts. And so Bernie has no response to this. Oh, yeah, that's what they say. They get into this whole thing like confidence. We're the richest country on earth. Yes, of course. Nobody's disputing that fact. But you can't take more money than exists from people just to fund your little scheme. And Cruz got in some really good stuff about Medicare and the wait times and this ridiculousness, and also undermined Bernie's argument about the healthcare in the UK and Canada by saying, like, this is how many less people get mammograms, MRIs, how long you have to wait for hip replacement surgery, what they do to old people, which is basically like stick you on morphine and say goodbye.
Right.
So I thoroughly enjoyed it. And since they got into the tax fight, the CNN guy said, maybe we should have another one of these and you can come back and fight about taxes.
Yes, please.
I think it would be great.
Because that's the solution for everything. Oh, the top 1%.
Yeah, that's where he went a couple times. If they repeal the ACA, that's a huge tax cut to the top 1% or something like that. They get a 2% cut. Oh, my God. Spare me. 2%. What are they going to do with all that money? They're just going to stick it in these rooms, and it's never going to circulate in the economy again.
That's right.
No concept of how the real world works. Still. And he did announce that Congress is owned by Big Pharma.
Oh, okay.
Yes. And and Cruz's closing statement, Bernie went off. So closing statements come around and Bernie starts by saying something, thank you, what you have to do, thanking everybody. And then launches into Ted Cruz got $36 million from 3 billionaires to run his campaign. It's like, what? And Cruz is like, where did this come from? What does that have to do with anything? The Koch brothers, they buy elections. It's like his tape got stuck, or the record skipped. No, Bernie, we're still talking about healthcare. That's the whole point of this thing.
Well, it's kind of like how Pelosi started railing against President Bush.
Yes, they're so old, and the talking points just are on a loop. And sometimes we get thrown off of that loop and end up on the wrong one. So his big ending was the GOP's idea is that you're on your own. That's it. Which means, obviously, you're all going to die without any. And then Cruz was trying to be funny, and he almost pulled it off, I think. He did a throwback to that old SNL skit. It was Blue Oyster Cult with Will Ferrell and the More Cowbell.
Uh-huh.
So he said that's what Bernie sounds like. Only instead of more cowbell, it's more government. So every time there's a problem.
Why do they try?
It wasn't too hokey. I mean, I'm not describing it that well, but I was like, oh, okay. People know that, and it's not going to stick in their heads. And I hope somebody makes a little video where it's just Bernie being like, more government. More government.
I got a fever.
Yeah. And I did say to Bernie, if you agree that the government is corrupt, which we seem to agree on, that it's taken over by these special interest groups and lobbyists and big business, whatever, why do you want to give them more power? Dun, dun, dun. Oh, the millionaires and billionaires, Teddy.
Yeah. Well, it's always going to be an uphill battle pushing back against this stuff, because what they can do is use examples for people who benefit from Medicaid, even though Medicaid is crap.
Right.
And in a lot of ways, it's just a useless card that people have in their wallets, because now you're seeing more and more doctors not even accepting Medicaid. But you can always find one person that benefits from Medicaid, and then you could throw them up there in a town hall and say, Medicaid saved my life. And then what are you supposed to do?
Right. And they did have that near the end. There was a father whose daughter was born with some heart defect and had to get a transplant, and then she needs some prescription drug that his employer provided healthcare doesn't cover. So he has to go under Medicaid. Somehow he's able to get it. And what would you do for people like me? And so Cruz's answer is we need FDA reform. There's no reason that drugs that are approved in other countries aren't automatically approved here. That they have to go through years and years. And this is why drugs end up costing so much. And this is why the pharmaceutical industry stays so small, because you need to have a huge pot of money to do R&D and get through all the licensing stuff and all the tests and trials. And so he discussed, the right to try bills that should be passed, which is if you have a terminal disease and there's an experimental drug, that you should be allowed to try it.
Absolutely.
And that seems completely reasonable. And I don't know that Sanders would get on board with that. He kept, it's all pharma, big pharma. The FDA does have some problems, I guess, but, we need them for who knows why, of course. So it is interesting that we're opening up this debate. And I'm happy that CNN's trying to bring this kind of stuff to the fore. It would have been nice the last 8 years
Yes.
to see these people. And I don't know why they chose those two. I don't know that I would pick Sanders to represent the Democrats because he's not really a Democrat. And he's got one of the farthest out left. Sure, I guess so. I mean, it was like, this is the presidential debate that we wanted to see.
Well,
maybe this is the alternative universe where these two are in the final.
But going back to the another one would be the VA. You could find a veteran that has benefited from the VA, but anyone who's been paying attention.
That was not discussed at all.
Ridiculous.
Which is shocking.
How does Cruz not bring up the VA with Bernie Sanders? Especially at the end, if Bernie launched into Cruz's funding of his presidential campaign. I think it would have been very effective just to turn to Bernie and say, why are we even talking about healthcare with this guy? Look what he did with the VA.
Yeah.
He should be disqualified from talking about healthcare really forever.
Pretty much. And if you'll remember, before the whole scandal blew up, that's what he was advocating for, the VA for everybody. And now that was a disaster, he's like, oh, let's just do Medicaid for everybody.
Yeah.
And that there was a discussion about there's a doctor shortage. And Bernie, his rationale for why that is because medical school is so expensive. This is for general practitioner doctors. Medical school is so expensive that when people come out of medical school, they become plastic surgeons because they need to pay back their student loans. So there's no incentive to become a general practitioner. So what's the solution?
Well, I'm guessing free college.
Well, yeah, there's some program.
Service.
That if you provide service, it's like AmeriCorps, but for doctors,
right?
Then we'll forgive your student loans and you can go be a general practitioner. And I was disappointed. This is where I wish Cruz was a little bit more on the libertarian side when you talk about licensing and how the AMA is involved and how they cap the number of people that can go to medical school every year. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
How crazy is that?
It's ridiculous.
No other profession that I can think of are they saying, no. We're only going to have this many people a year enrolled studying to become whatever, XYZ. And there's certainly no cap on lawyers. And we all know how useful they are.
Right.
But let's cap the number of doctors. And then you got to figure how many of them are actually making it all the way through medical school.
Well, tracking this on social media, it was clear to me, at least for the first half of this debate, that Cruz was wiping the floor with Bernie Sanders. Because it was nothing but comments that Cruz was winning, and the Bernie people were kind of quiet, except for saying that it's a shame that Bernie has to debate the Zodiac killer.
Sure, and that is a little unfair.
Yeah. So it was a lot of Zodiac killer. But then, I guess toward the end of the debate, Cruz, at least the way the picture was painted by lefties, was Cruz congratulated a woman for her MS.
I don't think there was a woman with MS.
Something about there was a woman with MS and she was on Medicaid.
Oh, okay, yeah. She looked like she gave herself type 2 diabetes, too.
Okay. So I followed a lot of people saying, what? Did Ted Cruz just congratulate her for having MS? Is that what just happened?
Of course it is.
So, and then there was something about comparing pregnancy to a Lamborghini or something. I don't know.
Oh, no. It wasn't pregnancy. What Cruz was saying is about the mandates. And so he said, okay, look, say the government came out tomorrow and mandated that everybody drives a Lamborghini. So that might sound really cool. Like, oh my God, yeah, we're all getting Lamborghinis. But here's the thing. If you can't afford it, you still don't get the damn Lamborghini. So your choice is no car or car you can't afford. Which,
if you're a thinking person, you hear that and it makes sense.
But Bernie Sanders was stuck on it. Like, I don't know why he's talking about fancy cars. It's just like, you cannot mandate people get the best of care.
Yeah.
Especially if they can't afford it.
Right.
And they did try to push him on, the penalty side and what those people are supposed to do. And do you think that penalty is fair? And that was Dana Bash that kept pushing that. And Bernie's like, no, I don't think it's fair. I think it's ridiculous. It's like, you wrote this, dude.
Well, one of the things I saw from people on the right on Twitter within the first 15 minutes, did Bernie come out and basically say that the president lied?
Oh, about the coverage and costs and
Yes.
doctors and stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty obvious to everybody. Didn't go as we planned. It's got problems. I'll admit that it has problems, but he didn't say he lied. But I mean, this is one of the things that he said, and I was just like, what are you talking about? And I don't know that I wrote it down word for word, but so Bernie says, the function of insurance companies is not to provide the best quality care. What? I'm sorry, when you buy homeowners insurance, do you expect them to build you a house? My car insurance company is certainly not building me a car or providing me with a car. I don't think he understands what insurance is.
Well,
as Chris Rock said, insurance is in case shit happens.
Right. And that's one of the themes that was prevalent throughout the whole Twitter discussion. You're absolutely crazy. You think insurance companies care about you. No one cares less about you than the insurance companies. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, there's actually a group of people who cares less about you than the insurance companies. And that's government bureaucrats.
Sure. But it is in the insurance company's best interest. If you'll concede, and I will, that they're in it to make some profit, then it's to their benefit that everybody stays healthy so they don't have to pay out a bunch of claims.
Right.
So there is an incentive for them to care about that. But this idea that all of a sudden it'll be this moral, caring, loving system if it's just subsumed by government is absurd. And that's why Cruz is running down like the death toll numbers from those civilized countries that have this stuff. Mm-hmm. And yet they don't point out that rich people in those countries buy their own private health insurance or go to the doctor and pay for them. But I mean, in Bernie's mind, if you don't have health insurance, you can't ever see a doctor.
Right.
Which is completely not true.
Well, now
there's some doctors that won't take any of this stuff and just say, hey, pay cash.
Yeah, I was just about to say, and I wish I had the piece in front of me, but I read it a couple of weeks ago where there's, it seems that Oklahoma, there are a lot of hospitals that are going to cash only. And I believe there's a place in Oklahoma City where someone had some sort of cancer treatment. I think it was colon cancer. Between the surgery and chemotherapy, it was $10,000 cash.
I mean, that sounds like a lot, but it's your life for $10,000. I mean, just the fact that we even have those kind of options is amazing.
But compare that to a typical cancer treatment done with, either paid by Medicare or private insurance. I mean, I want to say that my mom's cancer treatment was like $400,000, something like that.
Yeah.
And she, this was like over 11 months. Mm-hmm. And she passed away, but $10,000? It's amazing.
Yeah. It can be done.
Cut all the red tape. Just let doctors perform medicine. It's something that needs to be explored. I mean, we've talked about it over and over again, how it seems like the only part of the medical profession that doesn't seem to have these huge price increases is plastic surgery.
Stuff that's not covered by insurance.
Right. LASIK.
Exactly.
Stuff like that.
Sure. And imagine the competition. I mean, I know Walmart has little clinics in them. CVS does.
Yep.
That could expand tremendously. And if you decouple it from work, which I think that should happen, and maybe you'll see that going on in the future if we can get out from under Obamacare and just say, hey, just buy your plan. You could get on a plan when you're 20, 21, whenever you go off your parents, and just stay on it.
I just don't have a lot of sympathy for the pre-existing condition people that, of course I do if you were on an insurance plan and then something happened to you. Mm-hmm. But someone that is just skating through life and doesn't have anything wrong with them, and then all of a sudden they're 43, 44, and then they find out, they get some bad news, and then they're running around complaining that insurance companies don't want to provide them any kind of care because now they have a pre-existing condition.
Sure.
It's like driving around with no car insurance, getting into a wreck, and then running over to State Farm and saying, "Hey, I need insurance." No, wait a minute. Why didn't you have insurance before the car wreck?
That's what insurance is for.
Right.
But if you have a catastrophic option, then maybe you can get more people to sign up for that at a minimum. So they carry continuous coverage. And you also have to blow out the restrictions of allowing people to form groups, because that's how you get your premiums down, is by diversifying risk across many people. That's how this all works. It's like you all pay into homeowners insurance, and every year your house doesn't burn down, your premiums are subsidizing someone's house who did. And then one day when yours does, those people pay for your house. This is how insurance works. So Bernie's against removing the barriers to buying across state lines, because that'll be a race to the bottom. I'm serious. This is how this man's little mind works. So there's no solution for him aside from the government should be in control.
That's what's so funny. Okay, if you provide the ability for private insurance to be able to sell you insurance if you live in Vermont and you're able to buy it in Massachusetts, that's a race to the bottom. But providing Medicaid for everyone isn't a race to the bottom.
No, Medicaid's great.
So ridiculous.
Well, the entire argument is ridiculous. I mean, we had to deal with oh my God, am I going to have to pay for my birth control? And what about my maternity leave? And being a woman shouldn't be a pre-existing condition.
Oh, for Christ's sake.
Well, I'm sorry, but reality says that women are going to use more healthcare over time, on average, because they get pregnant. Like, this is how this works. It's not some conspiracy against you. It's reality. So you're not being penalized, but you should still be able to craft the plan for how you want. And Bernie admitted that it was ridiculous that men have to pay for maternity coverage in their plans, because that's one of the ways. This is the ways they jacked up things so we could cover all the sick people that were going to come onto the rolls, is by making people pay for crap they're never going to use. And then they try to say that it's a benefit.
How insulting is it to force a woman to pay for birth control in her plan if she had a hysterectomy?
Exactly.
It's gross.
Or to pay for maternity coverage if she can't have a kid.
Right.
It's cruel and unusual, I would contend.
I just don't understand. Look, why is it a requirement, or why should it be a requirement for birth control to be covered?
Well, and it's not covered. That's what people don't understand. You don't pay at the pharmacist, right? Mm-hmm. There's no money coming out of my pocket at the pharmacy for birth control. But it's going to the insurance company once a month in the premium that I pay.
Right.
It didn't just disappear. The cost of that didn't just evaporate. No, you're still paying for it. But you like the idea of not seeing the money leave your wallet directly or whatever.
And that's one of the reasons why healthcare is so expensive, is because people just pull out their card and they think, oh, it's paid for with this magic card.
Right. And they don't ask questions.
Right.
They don't say, wait a minute, why am I paying for XYZ tests? Are those necessary? What do I really need? Why does it cost me $5,000 a night to stay in a hospital?
And you don't call around to look for a cheaper alternative. If your doctor charges X for an office visit, you don't call around to try to find a doctor that will charge less because, oh, here's my card.
Yeah, insurance is going to cover it. So this is going to be a long, ongoing fight, because now they've said, oh, maybe we'll have a plan finished by the end of the year. Ugh. It's so incredibly frustrating.
They're going to blow it.
Probably.
I just get more frustrated every day by the Republican Party, and I got to pull up this story. It's driving me absolutely nuts. I saw this morning on Drudge. I don't know if you got an opportunity to glance at it before we started the show, but Republicans are going to go to the White House for a meeting with the president to push a carbon tax Former White House advisors, cabinet secretaries are pressing the tax. Environmental regulations would be dropped in exchange. A prominent group of Republicans and business leaders, including former Treasury Secretaries Hank Paulson and James Baker, will meet with some of President Donald Trump's top advisors at the White House Wednesday to push a plan to tax carbon dioxide in exchange for lifting a slew of environmental regulations. So get this. This is their plan. They are going to tax carbon, and then in exchange for taxing carbon, what they will do is they will send families of 4 who meet a certain income threshold. If they're poor, they'll get an annual payout of $2,000 in exchange for the higher costs of energy and everything else that is associated with a carbon tax.
This seems like a worthwhile endeavor. And the government keeps the difference once all those families are paid out?
Sure. And we all know what will happen, too, is after, say, they bribe Democrats into, passing this plan. Because it'll be an all-new entitlement. Essentially. Oh, we're going to give poor people $2,000. Okay, that sounds good. And we get to tax carbon. As soon as we get a Democratic president, what's the first thing that's going to happen? All those environmental regulations are going to come back, and you're going to have a carbon tax.
Mm-hmm. And the carbon tax is going to keep going up and up and up. And so what are they going to? This is all a scheme to force people off of fossil fuels.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw what happened with the cigarette taxes. Those were going to pay for education and whatever, the children at large. And what's happened is a bunch of people quit smoking, and now those revenues are gone, but they spent against the expectation of what they were going to make. And so now they're screwed because they've already spent the money because they sold bonds off thinking, oh, okay, this is how much we're going to net every year on this tax. And it turned out to be a hell of a lot less. So now they're in big trouble, and they need to find new ways to fill that gap. So let's call e-cigarettes tobacco and tax them, and your cigars. Throw them all under the cigarette tax, which was the big payout lawsuit dealy. No, they're insatiable, can't get enough, and they want to crush innovation and make poor people's electricity rates go through the roof.
Yeah.
But they'll get a nice fat check at the end of the year.
That's why I don't call myself a Republican. It's absolutely insane to me that they would even think about doing something like this. And you know, in the last week, we saw this whistleblower come out and saying that they've been cooking the books once again when it comes to global temperatures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to hide the pause.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I'm interested to see what else comes out now that the EPA is not going to be run by a bunch of greenies that are hell-bent on proving that we're destroying the planet. So this is laughable. I can't believe he would even take a meeting with them. But Tillerson had agreed that carbon taxes should be a thing.
Yes, and which is making me wonder, too, okay, what's the what's the hook here?
Well, the hook is then bigger oil companies that can absorb that will be fine. Mm-hmm. And you keep out.
That has to be it.
Right. And if they think that coal-fired power plants are going to come back online, they've got another thing coming. It's all a protection racket.
I just
Big
hope
cartels.
that the president of the United States takes the meeting. They have tea, and he shakes their hands and pats them on the head and says, okay, thank you. It was nice seeing you. Mm-hmm. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.
Sure. I mean, you can humor them. And I think this is a bigger waste of time than him tweeting. I do, but nobody will be incensed about this except for us and maybe a handful of other people. But the left will applaud. Well, this is a good use of the president's time. But we just have to pray that President Bannon's in the room, you know.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Because he's hip to this BS.
But this is, talk about another golden oldie that the left likes to pull out. I mean, during the Bush years, you know, Bush really isn't president. It's Dick Cheney.
Yes.
Dick Cheney's the shadow president. And he's just pulling Bush's strings, and he's you know, barking out orders, and Bush is just clueless, sitting in the corner, putting a puzzle together. And now it's Bannon.
Choking on a pretzel.
Right. Bannon is the new
Dark
Vice
Lord.
President Dick Cheney without being vice president.
Yes.
Because it's hard. Say what you want about Vice President Mike Pence and, his secret plan to drive around Washington, D.C. in a white van, throwing gays in it and taking them to the conversion camps. It's hard to paint Vice President Mike Pence as the next Dick Cheney.
Yes.
So we got to have a Dick Cheney.
Yeah, you need a devil.
Right. So
there he is,
Bannon.
Conveniently. But the difference is that Cheney never really fought hard on that.
Right.
I don't think. He just kind of laughed it off and went along his
what did
merry
that laugh
way.
sound like?
Yeah. Yeah, like a W.C. Fields.
The penguin.
Yeah, exactly. But Bannon just goes all out, guns blazing on them. Gives them too many targets to hit. It's so funny.
So where do you want to pivot? We've got, a few other stories we could talk about. President Drone Strike made an appearance apparently on some water skis this week.
He was kite surfing.
Oh, he's kite surfing? Is that what it was?
Yeah, with Richard Branson.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Have you ever gone kite surfing before?
No, I think it would be fun, actually. But I saw some people discussing how ripped he looked.
Okay.
It's like, are we seeing the same photographs?
He's a string bean.
Yeah. And he completely unathletic. So it was rather embarrassing for a while. It's just like, here we go. He falls down. And here we go. He falls down. I mean, I imagine it's not that easy.
No, I'm sure it's not, especially if you've never done it before. I give him credit for doing it in front of cameras because it was, if that were a Republican doing that, I'm sure it would lead on the Daily Show and everybody would be mocking him. But instead, we're going to hear about how ripped he is.
Yeah, you have to see what he looks like, too. And it just flashed back to, like, where was he in Europe where they caught him working out?
Oh, yeah.
And it was so embarrassing. He had little 10-pound dumbbells.
Yeah.
Getting all into it, sweating to the oldies. But he's so cool.
He is. Was he wearing the mom jeans while he was kite surfing?
No, but he did have a helmet on. And I guess I can understand why you'd want to wear a helmet. But still, it's not a cool look.
I wonder if they require you to wear a helmet.
I don't think so. If you're with Branson in the Caribbean, you're probably on Branson's private island. And I doubt that there's any, safety regulations that are enforced on your private island. But I don't know. Maybe the precious, maybe there is. Oh, no, Mr. President, you can't go out there without a helmet. We need your brain, sir. Save the world.
Well,
Trump Hitler.
It sets a poor example, Tracy Connors, to the children out there that are going kite surfing. If you go out kite surfing, Mr. President, without wearing a helmet.
Sure. All those children that are going out kite surfing. Those poor children from his hometown of Chicago, I'm sure they're just kite surfing across Lake Superior every weekend.
It was so ridiculous seeing that photo circulated of him riding his Schwinn.
Oh, that was the best.
In his mom jeans, wearing that helmet. It's like, why are you wearing a helmet? You aren't going any faster than maybe 5-6 miles an hour on that bike.
His brain is important to the survival of our species. This is a man that knows how to do everything better than everyone else.
That's true.
Never forget that. But speaking of the drone strike, there seems to be quite an uproar about what Trump said during his interview prior to the Super Bowl with O'Reilly.
What did he say? I mean, there's so much. I mean, the money quote for a while there that I saw was, him, comparing what the United States does to what Russia does. Mm-hmm. Is yes. that the money quote we're talking about?
That's the quote that I'm talking about. Okay. So O'Reilly says, basically, why do you want to get along with Putin? You think we can get along with him? And Trump, yeah. But he's a killer, O'Reilly says. And then Trump says, there are a lot of killers. You think our country's so innocent? And then everybody flips their shit.
Right.
Oh my God, that's the most un-American thing anybody's ever said. How dare he make immoral equivalency and da 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 da, on and on and on. And it's stunning to me. It's absolutely stunning to me because I applauded that. I was like, yes, I agree. Remember, we saw he died. Cackle, cackle, cackle. And then President Drone Strike. I was going through the numbers. There's a site called the Bureau of Investigative Journalism that had a good roundup on these, on the drone strikes. And they just have Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, and Afghanistan. And so this was just for 2016. So, and these are according to the official reports, which I question. So in Pakistan, there were 3 strikes that killed between 11 and 12 people. And they say only 1 civilian was killed. Sure.
How do we know that?
We don't. We just have to believe what the government tells us.
Right.
But you're telling me there are 3 strikes, maybe 1 civilian got killed. Yemen, 38 strikes, 0 civilians reported killed. But people killed, 147 to 203. So all of them were insurgents or terrorists or however we deem them, enemy combatants, I believe is what they use.
Right.
Somalia, Lord knows why we're in Somalia doing any of this. 14 strikes, killing between 204 and 292. An estimated 3 to 5 civilians were killed there. Sure. Afghanistan, you ready for this? 1,071 strikes.
Wow.
Reported killed 1,389 to 1,597. Civilians 65 to 105, approximately. So, yeah, we have killers too. Let's not act all innocent here. But they want to play this game where, oh, well, he's tied to these mysterious deaths of journalists. So you've got journalists very upset that we're trying to say, well, we've killed a whole bunch of civilians. And Trump has said since the beginning, since the campaign, during the second debate with Hillary, he went off on a tangent about the Iraq war and the number of deaths that were caused, not just American lives lost, but Iraqi lives lost. You're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions.
Right.
So, yeah, I do think it's fair to introduce that idea and stop pretending that we're completely innocent. We never do anything wrong. We're perfect.
Well, what's amazing is that argument has been made by the left for decades.
Yes.
And
but now it's offensive.
It's offensive.
Well, I think it's offensive because you're talking about the targeting of journalists. And then you've got Katie Tur, 2 days later on MSNBC talking about how there's a potential that Trump's going to have mafia hit squads killing journalists now. I mean, good God. And where were these people when Michael Hastings mysteriously dies at 4:00 in the morning in a single car accident?
Right. But Trump, to be fair, he does a piss poor job of pointing out that Putin is a scumbag.
Well, sure, but I think that's pretty much a given. Everybody believes this.
I mean, these people getting poisoned. I've never seen so many people get poisoned. There needs to be an international Mr. Yuck sticker. That's sent to Europe and in Russia. All these people getting poisoned. It's unbelievable. But
we have a corollary to that. It's the Clinton death list, right?
It's true.
Those people that shoot themselves in the back of the head all the time. That's an unfortunate accident.
Yeah, but look, the president of the United States needs to do a better job. He's got to artfully, dance around a question like that without making it sound like. I know it's not going to happen. And
no, but it causes debate and discussion, and so you can raise these ideas with people that want to be offended about that, and just say, no, he's right. We kill a lot of people too, including now Trump has joined the list of killers. He's had some drone strikes and some military operations now that have resulted in people's deaths. So this is reality. It's not pretty. But I mean, if you compare Putin's body count to that of Bush and Obama, it pales in comparison.
Yeah. Good times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one other story that I wanted to touch on before we bring on Ash Scow, the Super Bowl happened over the weekend, Tracy.
It did.
And it was a hell of a game. It really cracks me up. I talked to my dad. My dad, has a really bad habit of when he thinks a game is over, he turns it off.
Oh.
And as a Lions fan this year, he must have turned off 5 games that the Lions were behind in the fourth quarter. He's like, they're going to lose. And then they found a way to pull it off at the end and win it. Well, he turned off the game when it was 21-3.
Ooh.
Falcons. And in fact, he had a bet with somebody over the game. They bet a drink. Mm-hmm. And so he texted his buddy at midnight and he says, I think I'll have a top shelf drink. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? Patriots won in overtime. He's like, what? Of course, then he's pissed off. And it's like, what else is on at that time that you just could not watch the rest of the Super Bowl? You had to turn it off. Like, watch National Geographic? I mean, what is this?
Was he just so disgusted that he doesn't want to watch anymore?
Yeah. He was rooting for the Patriots even though he bet on the Falcons. Because he let his buddy pick what team he wanted to bet on. And so the guy, I want the Patriots. He's like, okay, I'll take the Falcons. But your pals over at Wonket,
yes,
wrote a piece. And, I didn't read the piece because I can't stand Wonket. But does this have to do with, a lot of people were saying that Lady Gaga didn't have any political message in her halftime performance, but does this have something to do with her singing "This Land Is Your Land"?
Yep.
Okay.
Of course. Well, that was the whole thing all week, right? The build-up. Lady Gaga's going to get political, and the left was counting on this. It was, you have a huge audience. I think I saw somewhere the numbers were 113 million people watched, which is just shy of how many watched President Trump's inauguration, for those of you who are keeping track of these things. And so, they pinned all their hopes on Gaga sticking it to the man. So Wonket, the headline, and this is why I like them, because they're snarky and I find it funny. If you missed Lady Gaga's political message, you're probably a dumb Trump supporter. So I said, that sounds like me, because I've missed the political message. So here's how they describe it. Firstly, there was the patriotic beginning, which started with God Bless America, then moved into This Land Is Your Land, and ended with the Pledge of Allegiance, leaving aside how liberals pat themselves on the back, and quite rightly, for knowing that This Land Is Your Land is a subversive political tune conservatives shouldn't be allowed to sing. Hi, fascists. We are at a very unique political time where the songs and rituals of patriotism are essentially a joke when sung by people who voted for Donald Trump. You can't support Pussy Grab Hitler, which is a great nickname for him, Pussy Grab Hitler's stab at autocracy, and sing the Star Spangled Banner with a straight face, unless you want the majority of Americans to laugh at you. So, I'll continue. Liberals often scoff at people who drape themselves in the flag and engage in displays of cheap patriotism. And to be sure, when people waved flags when W. Bush used 9/11 as a pretense for invading a completely unrelated country, and when Tea Partiers covered themselves in stars and stripes because they couldn't handle a black president, it was indeed lame and meaningless. But this is different. For Lady Gaga to begin her performance the way she did, with Vice President Mike Pence, he who drives around in the white van collecting gays to send to conversion therapy, that was my parenthetical, not theirs, in attendance, is a subtle message of, oh no, motherfucker, you and Steve Bannon's Russian puppet do not get these songs anymore. You don't get to wave that flag, because this country is ours, all of ours. This is so amazing to me. And Wonket isn't the only outlet that ran with this idea that she's taking back patriotism from the right.
Okay.
And that was the political message that we all missed. Oh, and plus the next paragraph. And speaking of Pence, who hates the gays so much and is definitely not a deeply closeted man, it wasn't exactly a surprise that Gaga performed Born This Way, as it is one of her most ginormous hits, but it's a song that in the space of a few years has become part of the LGBT, notice they don't put on the QRXYZ culture, with its message of radical inclusion for Gs and BLTs and all the letters that haven't been invented yet. And that song actually includes the words no matter gay, straight, or bi, or lesbian, transgendered life. And Gaga chose specifically to sing that as part of the Super Bowl for everyone to see. So that was a big fuck you to Mike Pence, apparently.
Oh.
Even though it's one of her biggest hits, which is what you sing when you're at the Super Bowl. Right? This is normally how it works when you're putting together a medley of songs to do. You don't want to pick some random B-sides.
I'm sure Mike Pence was sitting on the edge of his seat watching the entire halftime show.
Oh, I bet he was. He probably knows all the words to that song. He enjoyed himself at Hamilton. I mean, come on now. But this is so pathetic. This is what they're reduced to. Gaga might have made Mike Pence feel uncomfortable for 2-3 minutes because she sang about the gays. Big win, guys. Big win.
I'm always amazed how they're able to separate. What was it? Pussy grabbing Hitler?
Yeah, Pussy grab Hitler? Pussy grab Hitler.
Pussy grab Hitler, okay. But again, Bill Clinton is a rapist.
Correct.
We're cool with that, though, at Wonkette. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's pro-choice. You could be rapist if you're pro-choice.
I don't know what they call him. I mean, Biden, with his handsiness and the stories of him insisting on skinny dipping in front of his female Secret Service detail, that never bothered them at all. They called him Handsome Joe Biden, which is disgusting. Oh, and by the way, did you know he's now going to be teaching at Penn?
Oh, is he really?
Oh, yeah. We got to find a way to keep old Joe on some kind of payroll.
Wow.
Yeah.
So he's going to have the Biden Foundation.
Yep.
And he's going to be teaching at Penn.
Professorship at Penn.
I have to say, I would like to take a class by Professor Joe Biden.
Oh, do you have, let's see, $60,000 a year in tuition? I don't know if you can audit single classes there and what they cost, but.
Well, did you watch the whole Super Bowl?
I did.
I know you were happy with the results, right?
Yes. I was thrilled. Like, everybody's going to be salty about this, which is exactly what happens. And I delight in the schadenfreude.
Okay, so one of the stories out of the Super Bowl after it was all over was apparently somebody made off with Tom Brady's game jersey.
Yes.
Now, my question to you. If you somehow were in the locker room and you were able to stick that in your backpack and head for the hills, I mean, what do you do with that?
No, it's like the people that steal art, right?
Yeah.
You have to get it to somebody on the black market that wants it just to have it. But I don't know how you authenticate it, because now that it's been announced that it's missing, I mean, how do you prove that that's the actual game jersey?
Right.
If people can forge $100 bills, they can certainly forge a Tom Brady Super Bowl jersey.
I mean, I just think that's one of those things where, okay, you have it, and only you know that it's the Super Bowl jersey, and you frame it, do what people do, and just put it up there, and you
can't even really frame it.
I think you could. I think you could frame it and hang it in your house, and if somebody said, "Oh, what is that?" "Oh, I just got a Tom Brady jersey."
Yeah.
Wait. But then, weren't you at the Super Bowl?
Yeah, don't you? I mean, who has locker room access? This can't be a long list.
Right.
And
you have to have some sort of you have to have some sort of media credential or be a friend or family member of one of the Patriots.
Or work in the stadium.
Yes. I had access one time to a Lions game, and I knew I really wasn't supposed to be there. So before the game, I walked around and I was in the press area, and I had a picture taken at the coach's podium, which is now my avatar pic. But after the game, I had a buddy that worked for a media outlet, and so I had press credentials. So I was like, okay, do I go in to the coach's press conference after? It's like, oh, that's just a good way. I'm walking around with a mohawk. Nobody's ever seen me before. That's just a good way of getting kicked out.
Yes.
Getting my buddy in trouble. So I ended up passing. But, they've got a 15-minute cool down after the game. to let the emotions kind of wander and get yourself calmed down after a football game like that, and then everybody's allowed in. So could have been anyone. It could have been a member of the shady member of the media. It could have been a stadium employee. But I don't know. I don't know what you do with that. If you know that everyone's on the lookout for it, I mean, do you just like stash it for a couple of years and then try to sell in the black market?
I mean, like I said, works of art get stolen all the time. And some of them are still gone. There was a museum heist up in Massachusetts, and they still have no idea where the paintings went. And that was in the 90s, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, it's up there. It's the same kind of deal where it can only circulate in black market.
Well, good luck to you, Jersey thief.
Maybe OJ got it. Didn't he go down didn't he end up in jail because of beating somebody up for selling his stuff?
Yes. Oh, actually, the rumor is on Twitter that Steve Bannon stole the jersey.
Of course he did. They just stole it so they could have it framed real nice for when the Patriots come to the White House.
Right.
For their photo op, which, of course, will cause meltdowns all over again.
Well, one player has already, and I don't remember his name, but he's the tight end for the Patriots, has said he's not going to go to the White House.
Oh, how very brave.
Yeah. Can you imagine if a player pulled that during the Obama administration?
Well, I thought somebody did. I thought there was a hockey player that said they weren't going to go.
Did all hell break loose? I don't remember.
Yeah. It was offensive.
Well, why don't we go ahead and bring on Ash?
Okay.
Are you typing?
I am. I'm trying to figure out who that hockey player was.
Oh.
Because I'm pretty sure that happened a couple years back. I would say the name of this guy, this football player you're talking about, but I can't pronounce it. Martellus?
Bennett? Yes, okay. Martellus Bennett.
Yeah, he's the one that won't go.
So I'm doing a search for Ash Scow. Maybe I should wait for her to be added to the phone call.
Yeah, Tim Thomas is the one that refused to go. He was recognized Tea Partier goaltender. Tim Thomas refused to join the 2011 Stanley Cup Bruins on their trip to the White House.
So I don't have Ash's page bookmark on watchdog.org, so I always go to Google. And I start typing Ash Scow, and the first thing that comes up is Ash Scow hot.
There you go. She's been filling up the Google results, is it? Is that what you're saying?
I guess. So apparently people are Googling Ash Scow hot.
Oh, God, no.
Oh, yeah, how upsetting for you.
Yeah, it must be awful.
Well, I mean, it's one of the fills, but it seems to be like a weird thing to Google, because if you're just Googling someone and you want pictures, then you only need to put in their name. So adding hot seems almost like they're looking for the debate on it.
Oh.
Like what has been written or said about this topic, right?
No. They're just looking. It's an image search, I'm guessing, for hot pics of Ash Scow.
Which don't exist, except somebody has mistaken me for some cosplayer who went as Zaldana, and so people think that's me in the costume, but it's not. It doesn't even look like me. I don't get why, when you do an image search of my name, a girl in a cosplaying outfit comes up. Someone asked if that was me, and I was like, nope, but that's what happens.
Oh, the internet is a filthy, filthy place, Ash.
Yeah.
Well, your thoughts on the Betsy DeVos confirmation? What did you see in the aftermath? Everything what we were expecting from the left?
Oh yeah, they all voted against her, and they're going like they have been ever since. Well, really, Trump got the nomination. Everything is apoplectic. right? Everything is the end of the world. People are going to die. I mean, there was, who was it? For Vanity Fair, a Vanity Fair reporter editor that was saying that, like, Betsy DeVos's policies will literally kill children. Like, seriously? Like, her idea of leaving it up to the states, that's going to lead to death. And I get it. Any school shooting now is going to be blamed on her, even though, like, she didn't say, yeah, I want guns in schools because guns are awesome. She said every school needs to make the decision. And schools that have honestly been making these decisions, like, nothing is going to guarantee no school shootings. I mean, you see these schools that have gun-free zones, and there are shootings there. So, like, her saying, hey, every school should decide, the next school shooting is not going to be her fault because, I mean, it's probably a gun-free zone, but there's also, I mean, the school districts know best. But I get everything is going to be blamed on her. Every story, journalists are going to go looking for stories of students who were somehow hurt in their education, and they're going to find a way to blame it on Betsy DeVos. Like, just everything is going to be her direct fault right now. Like, it's just ridiculous. It's just like, the education secretary doesn't have that much power. Like, I mean, really, they don't. Like, they're not like some tyrant who is overseeing everything in schools. And it actually, Vox, of all places, had an article out today or yesterday, I believe, that was like, the education secretary is not there for teachers and educators. They're there for students. So, like, yeah, of course teachers' unions opposed her because they oppose school choice because it might hurt them and their pensions and their, you know, cushy, you can't fire me situation. But, like, so that's why Democrats opposed it, right? Because that's where the money is. Even though Elizabeth Warren in her 2003 book wrote about, you know, school choice being a good thing, now she opposes it because the teacher unions gave her a lot of money. And, you know, that's where Elizabeth Warren, with her whole get money out of politics, totally cool with it when it's money for her.
Right.
But, you know, I mean, like, this is just what's going to happen. And it's going to keep going on this way when it's like, she's there for the students and trying to educate people. She's not working for teachers or in superintendents or other administrators.
You broke this down a couple of weeks ago, but I want you to do it again for us because I did see some liberals freaking out after the confirmation vote, and again with the attack about bears and bear attacks with Betsy DeVos. Will you go back over that again and kind of debunk this idea that Betsy DeVos wants teachers to be armed in case there is a random bear attack at a school?
Right. So a senator from Wyoming, I want to say Barrasso, but I'm not 100% sure, gave an example when he was asking, you know, Betsy DeVos about schools being able to decide for themselves and everybody being in unique positions. And he brought up the example of a school in his state that is a very unique example because they have a fence around the school to keep out grizzlies because it is Wyoming. And so that was just, hey, that's just one thing that a bureaucrat in Washington really doesn't understand, that schools have specific needs based on all kinds of things, and a one-size-fits-all solution isn't plausible. So later on in the hearing, when Chris Murphy wanted to grandstand about gun control, you know, so we can make a campaign commercial.
Because he's from Connecticut, right?
Yes. Uh-huh. He asked DeVos about her stance on gun-free zones or whatever, and she said that, you know, I think it's best for the schools to decide, and she brought up the Wyoming example because it had been used earlier, saying perhaps that school would want guns on its premises in case of a grizzly attack, right? She wasn't saying maybe all schools should have guns because grizzly bears are a thing that attack schools regular. She was saying, for example, this school. Other schools might have other needs for guns for various reasons, right? Maybe a lot of their kids are armed and they want to, whatever. She didn't give other examples. She used the grizzly bear. So everybody, every dishonest journalist in D.C. in the country jumped on it saying guns should be allowed because of grizzly bears, as if she was applying it blanket statement, one size fits all, which was precisely what she was arguing against. But of course, SNL, other media outlets have just wanted to make her look like an idiot, and that she thinks bears are a regular occurrence in schools across the country.
Yeah. Completely
dishonest, completely unchecked, just absurd.
We live in Grizzly NATO. If you didn't know, that's going to be a movie out on Sci-Fi next year.
Yeah.
According to them. But yeah, I saw that they did it on Saturday Night Live this weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. I myself drove to my doctor's office in Alexandria, Virginia, and had to fight off about 3 grizzlies. And this was a good day. Normally it's like 10.
Were you carrying your bear taser at the time?
I have bear pepper spray.
That's
a thing.
Nicely in my purse.
Lovely. Does it have a cute little holster for it? I've seen pepper sprays now that come in a canister that makes it look like you're holding a little gun.
Well, yeah, but it's also pink,
Oh, yeah. It comes in pink and silver. Those are the 2 choices that I saw.
I got the bra holster for it, just in case. Yeah, nice. I got the whole works. Just for the bears. Not afraid of people, just for the bears that regularly attack me.
Oh, God. This is going to be a crazy 4 years with this nonsense.
It's just everything that is being reported is just wrong. I mean, not to say read somebody else, but Beckett Adams, my old coworker at the Examiner, I mean, every day he's writing an article that's like, no, this is complete bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, I just follow him on Twitter because he sees all of it. It's absurd. Every single big story and little story. If it makes Trump look bad, just assume that that's not what the story is and that it's going to be corrected, or real research is going to be done in the next couple hours to debunk it. Because that is just what's happening every single time. Journalists that are trying to attack Trump, no credibility right now. Just absolute zero credibility.
And they don't seem to care, which is just stunning.
They keep doing it. They have not learned.
Yeah. You'd think embarrassment and shame used to work.
Washington Post is the absolute worst. They are the ones that are constantly being called out for this stuff, and they're still not learning. What has happened to editing and fact-checking since Trump? I mean, you wanted to argue that Trump and Spicer use alternative facts, but the media is just as bad.
Yeah, it's hideous. And the Washington Post can't even argue, well, we don't have the funding to have a research staff.
Right, exactly.
They've got plenty of money, and Bezos seems happy to run that thing at a loss. So just take the time. I mean, we went through a story with you the other day, and I can't remember which fake news story that one was. It was about the Fascism Forever Club, started by Neil Gorsuch in high school, and how many steps you would have to go through if you were going to write that story. And you broke it down for us, and you were talking max 10 minutes of research to find out whether or not that's true.
Oh, who has the time?
Obviously not these people, but there's also no repercussion. So they'll get tons of shares. And I thought the Federalist did a really good job putting together a longer piece about, 16 or something fake news stories that have happened.
Yeah, and they were missing a whole lot. They were missing all the stuff on Russia hacking, the election, and, the Vermont power grid, everything. They were missing a ton of stories, but they did a really good job breaking down the number of shares that the fake story got, or the false, misleading, whatever you want to call it, story got, and how many shares the correction got, which was minuscule. They even, twice now, Vox, of all places, has corrected some of this stuff. Like, I'm sorry, but when Vox is correcting left-wing trash, you've got to really check your ethics.
But good for them. I mean, somebody needs to stay in it, trying to get to the truth zone. So
yeah.
I'll go look at them now if they're going to be honest about things.
Yeah. It's like, this is what you've become, mainstream media. Vox is skeptical of you.
A pathetic laughing
stock. You can't fool the people at Vox who wrote that there was a bridge to Gaza. You now can't fool them.
Yeah.
Let's pivot, Ash, and talk about what's going on college campuses, and specifically, can you explain to me what a bias response team is?
Yeah. Bias response teams are pretty much often anonymous reporting systems on certain colleges where students can report other students or faculty, professors, administrators, whoever, for being biased. And bias can mean so many things, which basically down to, like, if another student commits a microaggression against you, right? They say something that is not offensive, but you're offended by it. You can report them to the bias response team. They get investigated as if they've basically committed a hate crime, right? So we're now, rather than teaching students that, like, hey, you're going to go through life and hear things you don't like, you can either try to silence that other person, try to get them in trouble, be a little tattletale, and try to, you know, make sure that you live in a bubble your entire life, or you can be realistic, put on your big boy pants, and either engage the person with why they're wrong, or simply not develop PTSD. But no, the norm now is that anything that could possibly offend you or upset you is the worst thing in the entire world. It's basically a Hitler and you might die.
I know, things have gotten worse over the past, 5 years or so, but you really aren't that far removed from college. Was a lot of this going on when you were in school?
Not that I saw. I mean, there was bias against conservative students. I mean, my college Republican group experienced that. Like, when we protested Bill Ayers, a domestic terrorist, we were told to go stand, 150 feet away in the free speech zone. Whereas when liberals...
You didn't bear mace him?
What?
You didn't bear mace him?
I didn't have my bear mace down there. Florida is it's sharks, manatees, and alligators.
Oh,
not really bears.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have my alligator spray.
Nice.
Yeah, and manatee spray. Manatees, man, they jump out of the water. They come on land. They become regular cows. Right.
Did you guys bust a couple Starbucks windows out?
Had to.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. No, we were protesting. We were loud. We didn't start any violence. There was very few of us. But again, we were protesting a domestic terrorist.
But he's just a guy that lives in Obama's neighborhood, Ash. That's rude.
Yeah. Oh, I know. He's just an elderly little professor. He's
built for the block.
Sweet old man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when we protested, we were told, go stand 150 feet away in the free speech zone. When liberals protested Ann Coulter, who has never attempted to murder anybody, despite anything she's ever said, has never actually, worked to build a bomb, liberals were allowed to protest, like, right up there, like, as loudly as they wanted. Nothing happened.
Wow.
Now, the college Republicans were apologized to after the fact, which is always like, oh, we're going to do this, but then we'll just say a little apology and everything will be okay, they just get away with that.
Follow Ash on Twitter at AshScow, and of course you can read all of her work at watchdog.org and the New York Observer. Ash, thank you so much. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, talk to you then.
Thanks.
So,
yes,
I really don't miss college. As I get older, it's funny. A movie came out when I was in school called PCU, which is an incredibly underrated movie. Jeremy Piven, I believe, is in it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see PCU?
I have not, but I know about it.
I mean, it really painted a picture of what college campus wasn't like back then. I mean, it mocked this kind of behavior, but really, it was like Nostradamus, because it's what a college campus is today. And I never would have thought back then, when I'm a 45-year-old adult, I would think back then, oh man, I would love to go back to college. But right now it's like, oh my God, I would never want to be a college student. And I really am not looking forward to my kids going off and experiencing the kind of crap that Ash talks about on a weekly basis here on the show.
No. I mean, it's a daily onslaught.
Was it like that
Morning,
at Penn State
night.
for you?
There was some political stuff that was going on, but it wasn't anything approaching this at all. And like, I had some very left-wing professors, which, I have a minor in sociology that's not official, because I did get a D in Sociology 1.
Oh.
So I took that my freshman year, and it coincided with my sleeping. So it was boring as hell, but I think I ended up with something like 30 credits in Soc. You only need 18 or something ridiculous for a minor. So I do have it as far as I'm concerned.
Good
but I
for
took
you.
those classes, like specifically, a lot of them were crossovers with my major, which was criminal justice.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I took them knowing that it was going to be a lefty professor that I would just get a kick out of. So I wish I could remember the one that was the absolute worst. I don't remember the title of the course, but that guy was just unbelievably left and used the class to preach his own deal. Like, I remembered getting the syllabus the first day, and of course his book is on it. So, which you have to pay $70 to read. And
Right.
And it had nothing to do with the class. It was about how he and his environmentalist buddies got trash incinerators shut down in the 70s. And so this is like, wait, what's a trash incinerator? So we had to have this whole discussion. Well, what it does is it burns trash, and it burns it so hot it basically converts it to steam. So there's not much in the way of pollution coming out of it, and the byproduct is it creates electricity. Huh. That sounds pretty awesome to me.
What's the problem?
This is I think I took that class spring of 2000. I don't remember, around there. So this is when people were still up in arms about landfills, which you don't hear about anymore.
Right.
Remember, that was the big deal. It's awful. This is the worst thing that's ever happening, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's golf courses built over the landfills here, which are just absolutely beautiful. And I know it's gross. They have to have little vent systems and things like this. But, I don't know. The Native Americans buried their trash too, guys. Like, this is what people do. So it was eye-opening to me to say, wait a minute. So you guys shut this thing down? It sounds pretty rad. And I just remember there was a girl in the class, and the class was relatively small because it was a 400 level class. Mm-hmm. So maybe 30 people. And we had to sit in a circle. It's going to be a discussion class.
Crisscross applesauce?
So,
I mean, how...
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was really that bad. And this girl in our class actually lived in the Poconos area, and down the street at the end of her street was a landfill. Mm-hmm. And so she was just like, you know what, I'd rather have a smokestack than that landfill at the end of my street. He had, of course, no comeback to this. But I made it very clear on the first day. He wanted us to read that book. And then one of the other books was, I think it was called Actual Innocence, written by Barry Scheck, who was one of OJ's defense attorneys.
Yes.
And I said, no, I'm not reading that book either.
It's a microaggression.
Right. I'm not reading any of these books is what I said. And he's like, well, you're still going to have to take the test. I said, that's fine. How are the tests? Is it essays or what? Oh, multiple choice. I said, okay. So I actually aced the class, but he was vindictive. So I got a B+. And I wrote him a nice note asking him why, and to which he never responded. But it's pretty easy to take a multiple choice test when you know the politics of the person that wrote the test.
Right.
So I would just pick the most insane liberal answer and usually nail it. But it was great. And no, you know when it was? It was the fall of 2000, because the first day of class he asked who everybody was voting for, because that's appropriate. So this was Bush Gore. And come election day, I had swayed more than half the class I mean, people left, some people weren't registered to vote up in State College, and some people even drove home to vote that day.
Wow.
And I was like, yes, screw you, dude. Like, you're so weak. But it was fun. I mean, I had weird professors, though, because of that. So he was a weirdo. But then I had two professors that had been cops, one in Philly and one was a Canadian mounted police officer. Mm-hmm. I had another that was had been, I guess, in JAG because he was a Marine guy and he was a judge. And he was also the campus attorney for students. He was a badass. And then another professor that was the chaplain at the state penitentiary where they do the executions in the state of Pennsylvania. So he had to provide last rites for prisoners.
Wow.
He was an interesting guy. He was like 6'6" and drove an MG. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
It's definitely interesting. And I wish I could remember. I did take one and I remember it was called Social Problems. That was a class. So that was fun times. I mean, it's all, welfare state issues, abortion stuff. So you just go and argue with the professor every week. And that was how I looked at it. But there wasn't this marching crap. I mean, there was a decent sized pro-life contingent on campus. So I remember once a year they would put up those disgusting posters and things, showing reality and that would get people upset. But other than that, that's the only thing that really sticks out in my head.
You probably couldn't hang those signs up on a college campus today.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't think that you could. It's probably, I don't know, hate speech or traumatic. It's probably triggering.
Yes.
Would be my guess. There would be somebody that would feel triggered and that would have to come down right quick. So I don't know. I mean, I think these schools are killing themselves because we saw what happened with Missouri, with Mizzou. And you had a lot of their alumni saying, I'm not paying for this crap anymore. And I think they had to shut down 2 dorms or whatever. And I mean, if they cut off the federal funding to places like Berkeley, they're screwed. I keep hearing that. I think the number that I keep hearing that they get is $370 million.
Ugh,
and it's my understanding from having friends that work in higher education, the way that those grants work is so they say, okay, we're going to give it to the Berkeley Physics Lab to do XYZ and the Berkeley Medical to do XYZ. And they don't track the funds very closely. So they can just say, oh, okay, we're going to allocate XYZ to something over here. And then that gets funneled off into these crazy humanities departments to keep them afloat, so that we can have stupid majors like women's studies. What are you ever going to do with that? I mean, it's interesting, and I had to take that class. I had to take it. We called it bitch studies back in the day. And nobody seemed to get offended. I mean, that was just, people openly said, oh, you got to take bitch studies this semester? Yep. And it was taught by a dude. And I found that amusing. And so that's how you keep those departments afloat and radical. So if you start pulling back on these research grants and such.
Total enrollment last year at UC Berkeley, 35,000 students.
That's big.
300 and what was the?
I thought it was 370. It might be 270. I don't remember. I know it ends in 70 and it's over 100. It might be 270. Anyway, it's an absurd amount of money. Wow. Considering that they're probably sitting on a giant endowment.
Right.
And you got to figure tuition, even though that's part of the UC system. So in theory, it's a state school. I don't know what tuition is. I can roughly guess it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 a year. Let's see. Okay. Tuition and fees at Berkeley, $13,000. And then another $15,000 basically for room and board. So you're looking at 28, and that's in-state.
Wow.
That isn't too bad. I mean, Berkeley is a good school in theory. Yeah.
Well, anything else before we wrap this puppy up?
Elizabeth Warren got told to sit down and shut up.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Look at the Senate once again telling a woman she can't speak.
Well, those are the headlines. Elizabeth Warren silenced. She was mouthing off and saying, character assassination attacks on Jeff Sessions, and Mitch McConnell found his ball somewhere and said, "Excuse me, but you're violating Rule 19 of the Senate decorum standards, and you need to knock that off."
And this is why it happened. He was testy because he was not able to be at the Capitol Hill Club downing Rob Roy's.
Yeah. Yes.
So that's exactly. That's why he found his balls.
They were trying to keep talking.
Yeah.
All night to delay the vote. But I mean, this is so. These are the headlines, like CNN silencing Elizabeth Warren backfires on the GOP. So we're going to hear about overreach and stuff like this. But she broke Senate rules, so they called her on it. And then apparently they had a long debate about whether or not she needed to shut up. So this was going on simultaneous to the Cruz Sanders debate. So I didn't get to dig into this as much as I would have liked to. But the way that it's being presented, American Bridge, which I believe is one of Brock's many organizations, tweeted out, "Elizabeth Warren tried to speak out against Jeff Sessions and his racist past. She was silenced." Yeah, sure. She can run right back out into the cameras anytime she wants. So the Rule 19 that was invoked states the following, quote, "No senator in debate shall directly or indirectly by any form of words impute to another senator or to other senators any conduct or motive unworthy or unbecoming of a senator." So
what did she call Sessions? Like despicable or?
Well, he used his awesome powers of his office to chill the free exercise of the vote of black citizens.
Okay.
So she hid behind, that was Coretta Scott King saying that. I'm surprised that the words of Coretta Scott King are not suitable for debate in the United States Senate.
It's a twofer.
Yes, of course. But we need a human shield to put in front of us.
Oh, God.
Poor Liz. Poor Liz. I can't wait till 20 when she gets her head handed to her by Donald Trump.
Well, there are rumblings out of Massachusetts that Kurt Schilling may run against her.
That would be fun.
Kurt Schilling doesn't give a shit.
No, he really doesn't. And, I was a big fan of his back in the day before he went to the Red Sox.
Well, where can everyone find the Enough Already podcast?
You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, SoundCloud, and Stitcher. And you can also visit us on Facebook. And if you forget all that, you can go to enoughalreadypodcast.com.
Follow me on Twitter @FingersMalloy. Follow Tracy on Twitter @TracyL. as well. I guess that's it for this week. Tracy, final thoughts?
Huh.
Exactly.
Yes. I've violated Rule 19, so I've been told to shut up.
Tune in next week for an all-new Enough Already podcast. Thanks for listening. Have a great week.